we have these cycles. And when we like call a day that we just spend in our pajamas, like lounging around the house, like a wasted day or a worthless day because we didn't run enough errands and we didn't, clean the house or whatever. That's the kind of messaging that I think is really damaging for us to say to ourselves, because that's actually a recharge day.
Well,
and
especially in the postpartum period.
Oh gosh, yes.
Hi, I'm Rachel, owner of the NaturalBirth site, certified birth doula, childbirth educator, and midwife's assistant.
And I'm Tiffany Munez, certified birth doula, lactation counselor, and midwife assistant.
Here, you'll learn all about different aspects of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum.
Remember, none of this information should take the place of your care provider and is not medical advice.
Birth is not a medical emergency.
Thanks for listening.
Hey listeners, welcome to the Natural Birth Talk. I'm Rachel.
I'm Tiffany.
We are here with Maura Eliza, and she's going to talk with us about adrenal fatigue and just mental exhaustion in general. But before we get started on that topic, we want to let her introduce herself.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here today.
Yeah.
I am a traditional naturopath, and
Awesome.
I have been in the natural world for like over 15 years. And at first it was just kind of very for myself and for my family. And then I couldn't stop talking about it. So then I started telling people, and then I started deciding, getting into like actually sharing the things that I was learning with people.
That's
awesome.
Yeah,
that's kind of was my how it evolved. A lot of people have like a big, deep health story, and I had, little things, but it wasn't like, it was just really a deep, endless curiosity and fascination for me.
I love that. Yeah.
And you started, or at some point in time, were a birth doula, right?
I was, actually. And that did kind of come in when I started really diving into the natural world. Being a doula made me really start to appreciate the wisdom of our bodies and see the limits of our medical system, which I hadn't really given a ton of thought to. I went through that training at literally the same weekend I found I was pregnant with my second son.
Yeah.
So my first birth, I had wanted a natural birth. I didn't really know why. And because I couldn't put words to that, I didn't honor it at the time. And then during my training, the music therapy assisted childbirth training, which is very much overlaps the doula training, which I also did at the time. I realized, oh my gosh, my doctor had put me at risk. And there was this coursework that I had done had a birth art component to it, where I realized why I wanted that unmedicated birth. Oh my gosh, it was
That's
amazing.
awesome. Yeah.
And I would say it really like gave way to a huge awakening that has led me, even though I'm not doing doula work anymore, it's led me to where I am now, and to just it was a big seed planted in my life, in my heart, in my soul, that was like, oh my gosh, this is how it works. And this is what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. I love that. So to get back, or to start with our main topic today, although I do really want to talk more about music and doula stuff with you, because I do think that'd be just so interesting for our listeners to kind of learn a little bit about that. But that's not the point of today. So mental exhaustion and adrenal fatigue. And I know before we started the recording, Tiffany and I were telling you about how we have gone through those things in this past year. I know
Through the trenches.
Oh, for sure. Like I've been told by probably 4 different people, like, oh, you probably have adrenal fatigue. I'm like, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Right.
And it's not fun.
It's not fun. I've been through it twice, and not ironically, the first time was when I was doing the doula work and building a business and all of these things. It was very new to me at the time. Like I didn't come from a family that did that kind of stuff. I came from a lot of employee-based family. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But to then like have to go through all of the development and the personal growth stuff that you're like, I'm going to put myself out there, and I'm going to, in that time do the work. I'm going to be next to doctors, and not that I was doing doctor work, but like, maybe like
in the space,
questioning in the space. Yeah. And so it was a huge, huge, huge amount of personal growth. And then you just got to do the darn thing, and you got to learn. There's lots of learning going on and lots of working and, for lack of a better word, hustling.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
that absolutely, like, I was just trying so hard to hold on to everything and keep everything together. I had 2 young children and basically trying to do too much on not enough time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I just kept depleting myself until I just couldn't anymore. And that actually, sadly, was the end of my birth business, because I literally burnt myself out in that adrenal fatigue space. It, damaged my marriage as well. I lost everything that I had been trying so hard to hang on to.
Yeah.
And then I actually went through a couple years of depression. And that was what recovery was like from that. I didn't want to do anything like at all. And I just was really struggling as I was recovering from adrenal fatigue that first time.
Okay.
So
that's rough.
The second, it is rough. It's very rough. So the second time, now both times my like, oh, this is adrenal fatigue, was like waking up in a literal panic attack, like just from trying to sleep to like, that's your first thing that happens in the morning.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, it's not fun. So when it happened to me again a few years later, I was like, oh my gosh, I know what this is. And it wasn't as deep as the first time, but I knew to take it very seriously. So but the thing that I did differently the second time was to kind of not do anything the same that I did the first time.
Learn from your mistakes.
Exactly. I mean, the first time, I mentioned that I ended up in depression and all of that stuff, but on the way there, I had been trying to recover from it and like boost my energy with supplements or like walking the dog. Or if I had a day when I was just like exhausted, it was because, I would be thinking back, like, what did I eat? Did I have dairy? Did I have gluten? Did I have blah, 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 blah? And like, just all of this, like hypervigilance, I guess I would call it, to those things that were outside of me. And when I look back, I'm like, oh, that was such a distraction from what the truth was. I kind of knew about emotional affecting the physical, but when it came up the second time around, I had been studying something called German New Medicine for several years.
I've heard of it.
Oh man, that's a podcast I'd like to do.
Okay.
I had really started to see that in the apprenticeship that I had been in. That was something that my mentor was familiar with, and he worked a lot with that as well. And so the second time around, instead of looking to more supplements and like what magic nutrient am I missing, I was like, okay, well, there are definitely some big things that need to come off my plate. And I will say, even though I was really proud and like in a way enjoying homeschooling my kids, that was one thing that I knew that I had to make a hard decision about. And I had to send them back to school. And
don't tell me that. I homeschool my children. I love homeschooling my children, and I don't want to send them back to school, but also sometimes I feel like it's the only thing that can change so that my brain can function. But also I don't think sending them to school would even help, because then I'm worrying about school.
Then you're stressed about school, right?
And being on someone else's timeline, which is not how I function.
Yeah.
Yes. I had, it was probably one of 5 different ways I could have addressed that problem. So sending them back to school is just what I ended up choosing. There may be several other options at your disposal that would not be sending them back to school, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, what are they going to be teaching them? And, oh my gosh, I have to do the pickups, and oh my gosh, packing lunches. And I have one kid who is just very particular. He likes healthy food, but he's just particular about what he eats. And like, we wrestle about that. We wrestle about clothes. He's Gemini. We wrestle about all of these things. He's just like tried and true. I adore him. But anytime he's like, hey, let's shop for some clothes or let's pick out some food, I'm like, no. So that was another just stressor. And like, it was just kind of working through that actually helped me create the solution, because the solution really was in listening to myself and working with my nervous system with a twist. So when a lot of people talk about the nervous system, they start talking about polyvagal and bilateral tapping and maybe EMDR and stuff like that. Those are all great. I've done all of them, but it never, like, I just don't walk around tapping myself. I don't. I needed something that was fitting into my, like, here's the things I do. What's that book, Atomic Habits or something like that? It was kind of like both, what can I pair with the things that I'm already doing, but also, is there a different way that I can look at the things I have to do each day and like work with my nervous system in that way?
Okay.
And so that's where I actually went. And I just started listening to my body in a totally different way. I sent the kids to school. They were sad for like 5 seconds. They're on their second year in school, and they are just really thriving. They're doing well.
Good.
In that case, I had to really remember that, like, there's nothing more powerful than the home environment, and like having, number one, a mother who is centered and happy and like not trying to do 20 things in 24 hours.
Yeah.
And sleeping for 4 or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Is worth more than anything, and on top of that, any messaging or anything that I might be of concern in is going to get through to them at some point anyway. We can't keep them in a bubble forever.
True.
But also what we're talking about and exemplifying at home makes so much more of a difference than what people who are in their life for a year, a couple hours a day for a year or less could ever do, So, and then I make them do a little study on the side. We're doing some critical thinking stuff. So that was my happy medium, where I was like, okay. And as soon as I just decided, even before they went back to school, as soon as I just decided, and there was an endpoint to the daily stuff, it just felt like the deepest exhale I've ever had.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I knew that I was on the right track. So it actually took me just a few months to start really, it was progressive to like really notice, okay, I'm really feeling a lot better. And then within about 6 months, my business was thriving.
Okay.
And I was able to handle it. Whereas before I almost didn't have time for my business to be successful.
Yeah.
And when I, about a year later, so it's been about a year now, I'm able to do things like professionally and personally and stick to things that I wasn't able to do before, like ever in my life.
Yeah.
Because I just have just a new perspective on the little things that are important to keep myself, like bring my base level active nervous system activation just down. So a tough day is just not going to go as high in terms of nervous system activation as it used to, because I'm starting at a lower baseline. I'm able to get deeper into sleep because I'm starting at a lower activation. I'm able to say no and really evaluate and not get distracted by the shiny things, personally or professionally, because I'm at that nervous system. Like, once you start doing these things, you're like, I'm never stopping this, because I can see how this is the way to go.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this topic as a whole is so important, because we live in a culture that expects just as much, if not more, from women a lot of the times. And moms specifically, because we have to raise our children, and we're expected to work, and we're expected to do, XYZ, all these things.
Sure.
And I know that's not how everybody feels about it, but, that adrenal fatigue, or at least that, mental exhaustion is so prevalent. I feel like it is so common because we're trying to do all the things, but we can't do all the things.
Yes. Yes.
And
Agreed.
we have to recognize that. And it sounds like you really were able to take that step back and recognize that. And so for the listeners, like when you're pregnant, when you have a newborn, when you're trying to learn about birth, you know, it's hard to balance all of that. And that's where, like, hopefully some tips and tricks or whatever you can give us today, your online class or whatever that you have, hopefully that's going to be able to bring a huge benefit to the listeners, because I just feel like it's just so common. It's such a common situation to just be in that mental exhaustion and then even that adrenal fatigue type of state.
Exactly. And I work with women specifically with this. And the reason is because, number one, I am a woman. I can't imagine what it's like to be a man, much less tell them what is best for them.
Right. Yeah.
But on top of that, I think the way women handle and like the way we're very rhythmic, we're very cyclic, you know, our bodies are made to have a cycle that is connected with larger cycles. And, you know, before we started recording, you mentioned you just haven't felt like recording. And that's part of the larger cycle, you know, that I don't know. I think that the way work culture is right now, it expects the same level of energy, the same level of interest, the same level pretty much all the time. Not that anybody is really like that, but that's almost the unspoken expectation. But the reality, especially for women, is that we go through these cycles, and we go through weekly cycles, we go through monthly cycles, we go through annual cycles, and maybe even beyond that. But all that I've been able to pinpoint, it's been like the annual cycle. So I know that probably like in the last month or two, like I tend to go through like a very prolific cycle at this time of the year in the fall, where like, oh man, those social media posts are just rolling off my fingers. I can come up with all of the things. And then I go through a time where I'm like, I don't want to show my face. I don't want to I don't want to create. I don't want to put anything out. And it's just such a restored, like I used to look at it as like, oh, I'm in a slump. But no, I'm restoring from all that energy that I expelled in that other very prolific cycle. So just as a business thing, what my coach has helped me do is take that prolific time and bank it and then use it to cycle it, you know, like write all the social media posts that you have. And then, I mean, nobody looks back more than 6 months in your social media, like recycle that content again. Also, it gives you like
you can do that because
message.
That is like weird for me. Like, I feel like if I posted about something, even if it was a year ago, I feel like I can't post it again.
Also, no, it gives you a consistent message.
Yeah, so Tiffany, I feel like
that's what I was going to say.
It's going to be helpful for you specifically since you run most of our social media.
Yeah. Google Doc. I mean, you could go back and you can reword those posts, or maybe learn something that you change a little bit.
I've already kind of done that, like based off of like my personal social media, like my personal business page. If you go back and look, like you can see like some of the posts for the business site, like I've taken from my personal business site. And just kind of like reworded it, redone the images, like, because I mean, no matter what, it's all really important information. You know, it's all information that we want for our listeners and our, you know, our social media following.
Yeah. And if we have new listeners or new, you
know, like we could have people now that we didn't have a year and a half ago, you know, or, you know, we have followers that followed our, you know, the Natural Birth Talk business page, but maybe don't follow my personal one, or, you know, vice versa.
This is why you run social media, because you're smarter than that kind of stuff.
It takes multiple exposures to a topic, an idea, or whatever for people to like really take it in as well. So that's a business thing, but what we're really talking about
we digress.
is that, you know, we have these cycles, and when we like call a day that we just spend in our pajamas, like lounging around the house, like a wasted day or a worthless day because we didn't run enough errands and we didn't, you know, clean the house or whatever. That's the kind of messaging that I think is really damaging for us to say to ourselves, because that's actually a recharge day.
Well, especially in the postpartum period.
Oh gosh, yes.
Like, please just just lounge all day for 4 weeks.
Yes.
That's all I want to do.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And that I can understand is hard to do because most people's nervous system isn't set up for that. If you have been overtaxing and like demanding lots and lots of things from your time, from your mental space, your structured day, and you don't have any day for like, or any time for flow, then as soon as you try to introduce that white space, you start being like, ooh, let me add something else here. Let me fill that up. Oh my gosh.
100% what I do to myself.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to take the time to not do that. And sometimes it can take a month, it can take more to get out of that cycle and putting yourself back into the overburdened state. And it gets tricky because sometimes your body's like, or your mind will be like, I really want to do this. You know, I've been wanting to start this hobby for years and now I have time. It's just going to be so for me. It's just, but really it's more running around and learning and like, it's more of that energy that got you into the adrenal fatigue place in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have a free workshop called Overcoming Overwhelm Without Complicated Self-Care Routines. And we go into the different parts of ourselves. Like I call it the masculine and the feminine, not my terms. There's lots of people who talk about masculine and feminine essences. Yeah. But just to tap into and to get a sense of like, well, here is where that essence is useful. You know, either one. Here's where the masculine essence is useful. Let's start there because so many people are, you know, that's what you need to work your job and to coordinate. Like I got to leave at this time to pick up the kids and and like all of that, like structuring and a lot of business running traditional business running is from that essence. And anybody can be really great at it. It doesn't really matter what body parts you have. But we all, especially women, like when they don't take time for their feminine side, that's when we hit the overwhelm, and that's when we hit the mental exhaustion, and that's where we hit the levels of that really take us down.
Okay.
And so what I'm doing with that workshop and with my course called The Vibrant Way is helping women find little ways every day that they can cater to their own feminine. And
I love that so much. You have my like full attention right now.
Because like if you don't do that, like then your nervous system's a wreck. Yeah. And then, you know, if you do try a new supplement, can you even take that in? No. If you do a new awesome workout, are you going to stick with it? No. Are you going to, you know, like it's not what you need. You need the rest. You need that connection with because that's where the feminine side is the side that lets you get to the joy and the playfulness and like the just indulgence and really choose where you live the life that you were put here to do. We weren't, you know, even if you are very passionate about your job is a calling for you, which it is for me. It's not all of life, you know? Yeah. So being able, and it becomes practice. It's because it takes practice to be able to like shift into that other side of yourself and enjoy it. But it's so nourishing, like on every level. Yeah.
Well, and I want to make a quick note of like, we keep talking about, you know, just because this is what's relatable for the three of us is that moms who work and have to balance all these things. But there are plenty of moms out there who don't traditionally do what we call work or have a traditional job. And I'm putting that in air quotes because being at home with your children and taking care of them or homeschooling, or even if you send them to school and taking care of the house, like that is work. That is a job.
Absolutely.
It is bringing value to you and your family. Maybe not financial value, but it is kind of, because then you're not paying for childcare and then you're not, you know, whatever.
And you can't put a price on what that is, you know, being home for your kids. Go ahead and finish your thought.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, this is applicable for moms who don't have that traditional job or traditionally work also. And I just want to make that distinction because we keep talking about ourselves who try to do it all and we're not.
100%.
Doing as great as we could be.
And I work and I see the same I see women of all backgrounds and all life things, you know, having the same exhaustion and the same overwhelm and the same, you know, all of these things. It doesn't really matter. It's not about like the person who leaves the home to work or works from home is going to be more exhausted than the stay-at-home mom. That's not been my experience. The thing that I find is common for both of them, and maybe a little more common for women who don't bring in income in, you know, the form of a paycheck, is that sometimes it's harder for them to invest in something like this and to say like, oh, actually, I'm really needing this. You know, sometimes people tend to think like, oh, she's just going to say like, do less, make less commitments. And there may be a component of that to it, but there's so much more to it. You know, I wanted a course that, number one, women who were already overwhelmed could still take on without adding to their overwhelm.
Yeah, because trying to learn something new is overwhelming.
Exactly. So we get you up and running pretty quickly, and so that you're working through that overwhelm within the first little bit. But I also wanted it to be something that was more than just, oh, make more white space in your calendar. Because if it was that simple, you would just do it, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But, and when you make that white space, you know, what do you do with it? Do you use it to like clean the house or like,
because that doesn't sound fun. I don't want to do
somebody else.
Yeah.
There's other little tips and tricks in that course that really like doesn't take more time from your day. It's just a shift in like what you're doing that quickly adds to your mental capacity and like your ability to enjoy your day and to connect in with the joy that's already there, you know?
Yeah. I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned, okay, so we talked about like how women go through cycles, which I find incredibly interesting, and was actually just reading a magazine article in the chiropractor's office like a few months ago about that. And I didn't get to finish the article, which made me really sad. I mean, not really sad. That was an exaggeration, but I wanted to. So I find that super interesting. And then you made a comment about how like sometimes we have to shift our perspective of how we're looking at things, which is huge. I'm like always at my kids about like, let's have a better perspective about this. But sometimes that's really hard to just shift that perspective. And you know, doing less, but then just like you said, it's sometimes doing less isn't an option. It's just little things you can change in your day.
Yeah.
And that will help you when you get out of that, you know, mental overwhelm. That will help you to have that better perspective is kind of what you said. Like when your baseline is lower, when your stress baseline is lower or whatever you want to call it, then you have a toleration for more.
Yeah. And just as an example, this isn't something from my course, but this is something that somebody posted on Instagram just like yesterday that very much fit into it. This gal told a story about how she was going over to her sister's house to help her sister do something or other. And, you know, so there's like a definite, like, we're going there for this. They're expecting us, you know, all of this very, I would call that like a masculine, like, here's a definitive, like time, purpose, action, all of those things. And they got stopped by a train on the way. And because she was in that mode and didn't really question it, she just started driving like alternate routes to get around this train.
Which probably
and by the time
it
took as much time. By the time they got back, it took as much time as if she had waited for the train.
Yeah.
And I just giggled at myself because I've done that, right?
For sure.
Especially in the car, especially with having cell phones at our fingertips, instead of just sitting at a stoplight or sitting when a train comes, we get all, you know, purpose minded and like we can't wait. We can't take this moment. And if you took that moment to deep breathe or just be like, oh, okay, I get a little rest. And remember that like, your sister's not going to care if you're even 5 or 10 minutes later than you said, probably. There's a such thing as, I call it divine timing. Sometimes I'm so late for a meeting and somebody's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're late. Let me finish my meal. Or I finished this, whatever. And I'm like, oh, but I have been,
You're welcome.
stressing. Yeah. I have been stressing for no reason all the way because I was it's just, it's those little things. That didn't take any more time for me to just be like, you know what? Sometimes divine timing happens. I honestly don't care that much when people are a little late for the same reason. Sometimes I'm just wrapping something up. And
I legit sent Tiffany a text this morning. I said, hey, we got a recording. She's like, okay, I'm good to go. And I'm like, I mean, I'm probably going to be late, not for any particular reason, but that's just how I roll.
And just who I am as a person.
While I was waiting just to say like this, I teach this course. It's because I find what helps for me, but like, I still have to hold myself to these things. As I was waiting, I was tempted to like, I could just open Instagram. Oh no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just sit here and be present for this awesome conversation that I'm getting ready to have. I'm so excited and just sit in gratitude and like enjoy that.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh.
I need to teach that to my children. I literally just got after them yesterday. I had to pause schooling for like 2 minutes to go help the 3-year-old. And I come back and they're like throwing a ball around. I'm like, you really couldn't just sit there for 2 minutes and be patient? Like you had to find something to do for that 120 seconds.
Yeah. But it was rolling a ball, it was like they're slipping back. That's the beautiful thing about kids is that they're always so close to that joy and that playfulness that we have to take like, I need a half an hour to decompress and then maybe I can blah, 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 blah. It's just harder for us to get there, but we can learn something from them where it's like, or I could just let myself, roll this ball from each other and connect in that way together.
Now, if they weren't running around the room and fighting over it, I probably would have felt the same way. I'd have been like, cool, they're all getting along rolling a ball, but that is not the situation I walked back into.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah. There's that too.
Oh goodness. Anyway, Tiffany, is there anything you want to ask or say?
No, I really enjoyed just like listening to all of this. Like, Rachel had said, it's been a really hard year for both of us. So I'm kind of interested in just taking the workshop myself.
Me too.
Do it. Go. Yeah. The Overcoming Overwhelm workshop is free. It takes about an hour to go through it. Some of it will be, repetitive of what I just said, but it always helps to hear it a couple times.
For sure.
But at the end, we do an exercise that's like so simple and it's not included in the course. So it's kind of a bonus. Mm-hmm. And it's something that you can do starting like the next day as like part of your practice. Like we go through what is self-care.
Because I feel like that term is very muddled right now.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, so I will, just to give credit where credit is due, a book that I read was called The Surrendered Wife, and it's totally just about relationships. So it wasn't even necessarily on this topic, but there was a lot of overlap. So the lady who kind of got me turned on to this idea of like, what is self-care? Her name is Laura Doyle. And it was actually her second book that really clarified. The book is called The Empowered Wife. If you're going to read them, I recommend reading them both.
Okay.
But that's where I really started to think about like, well, what kind of self-care have I been giving myself? And so that's one of the things I try to help you learn and like work through and make a distinction in just in that free workshop.
Yeah.
But then we build on that, of course, in the Vibrant Way.
Because sitting there and scrolling on Facebook in your bed for 20 minutes is not self-care.
Yeah. No. And I do a lot of frequency medicine in my actual practice. So talking about frequency, like not only the EMFs, I do frequency therapies, of course, talking about your own, like the Vibrant Way is very much working with frequency, although we don't call it, it's just like your self-generated frequency. Mm-hmm. And when we're on our phone and we're being exposed to the radiation, the different things that are coming off of your phone, it puts your nervous system into that active sympathetic state. Yeah. So what we want to do for your self-care is actually get you closer to the parasympathetic state. Yeah. So scrolling. And then I think there's also something to like the constant change of stimuli, like the feeds, the
constant stimulation. Yeah.
It is. It's like, oh, I just scrolled and now it's a different song or a different, like you're having to process
different colors and
oh my gosh, so much you have to process. It's exhausting. And it can feel a little bit like you're being mindless and like taking time to yourself, quote unquote. But really, I do recommend when people do self-care that it's away from the phone and that it's not a Netflix binge. As much as I love those, I'm not trying to poo-poo them, but it's something different than those things. Yeah.
Interesting.
Huh.
Like I said, you have my full attention. Like this has been a really, really joyful talk. I'm very grateful for this. I'm also going to take your workshop. So that will be a lot of fun, hopefully, and it will help me out in some ways. Is there anything else that you want to say before we finish up?
Just that recovering from mental exhaustion and getting overwhelmed out of your life is closer than you think.
Good, because that's not where I thought that sentence was going.
I know,
right? I thought it was going to be recovering takes time. Don't expect so much so quickly. But you just like flipped it around and was like, it's closer than you think. And I'm like,
it does. It's both. It's really both. I mean, it takes time, but you can feel so much better and notice the differences so much faster than you expect. Like, I think when I was doing all the supplement stuff, and even when you're using prescriptions, they'll tell you, 6 to 8 weeks. It's like, no, that's not what this stuff actually takes. Whenever you feel better sooner, that's the kind of stuff. That's what I like to do in my practice overall. So I'm kind of an impatient person. But the longer that you stick with it, then you continue to recover and continue to like build a totally different way of living your life. That's why I called it the vibrant way, that it's a totally different way. And it's like an onion. So you're like, if you went through it, the course, when people join the course, they have access to the content for 6 months, but we also have a group on Instagram. It's just a private feed where we have monthly integrations, because even if we did something that you already did in the course, having been through the course, or even as much as you've been through, and then going back and doing it again, it lands differently, because you're like, oh, I get this in a different way. It was impactful the first time. It's just as impactful the second time. Yeah. Or third time or 12th time, because we're always in flow. Like sometimes we're able to stick with these things really, really well. It's new and we're excited and we're doing blah, blah, blah. And then sometimes we let go of it for a little while. And then you have to, bring yourself back gently. Yeah. It's part of it, but, honor the cycle. And be okay with that. But when you come back to it the next time, you're like, oh, wow. Even if you just totally went off the rails and then come back to the things that, you're doing for yourself, you're like, oh, now I know and remember why I need this so much and why this is so important for me.
Awesome.
So I'd love for you guys to join. The free Overcoming Overwhelm workshop.
So
as many people as possible.
Is that link, is that just on your website?
It is on my website, but I also send you a direct link. Cool. And so it's a video, and then there's an ebook that you can download as well.
Okay, awesome. So great. I will put links in the description box so our listeners can find your site and find your awesome resources. Perfect. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad
thank you
to us.
Well, thanks for having me. We could have done a whole talk about birth, and I would have enjoyed that too. I still love it so much. I get so nerded out on it.
Seriously. We're right there with you. So we probably will reach out and have you back on maybe in a few months or something, because this has been a really enjoyable talk for me.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. I'd love to come back.
Awesome. All right, listeners, like I said, I'm going to put I'm going to put links in the description box. And if you guys have any questions, reach out to us at contact@thenaturalbirthsite.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Rachel Manns again. If you want to learn more, please subscribe to and rate this podcast, and head over to thenaturalbirthsite.com to check out our online natural birth education course, birth story blog, YouTube channel, and more.